welcome to the Comic Corner. My name is Damon Gray. I am your host, and today we welcome an Eisner, Ringo, and GLAAD nominated writer working on great titles like Supergirl, The Marauders, the ongoing Scarlet Witch book, and just so many more. If I keep going, I'll lose my time. Steve Orlando, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, happy to be on. Happy to be. I'm the bridesmaid of every single comics award. So maybe next year, the bride. We'll find out.
Eventually one will fall. Steve, I have this question for every single guest we have on for the first time. What is your comic book origin story? As a fan, how did you get into comics?
So my father sold sports memorabilia as for one of his jobs when I was younger. And the thing was, I was not into sports, at least not the sports that you could get memorabilia for. I did them in high school and stuff, but I did swimming, and there's not a lot of swimming trading cards. I think those are usually just paid subscription services. So I would go to flea markets and I would go to these shows with my father. And the thing is, I didn't have much interest in the things he was looking for. But what do they also have at these types of events? They have non-sports cards, and they have, you guessed it, like 10-cent bins of comics. So, the origin story is I was at the Syracuse flea market, which was every Saturday back in the 80s and 90s. And I discovered West Coast Avengers 16 in some what today would be a dollar bin, but back then was probably like a handshake or a hay penny bin. I don't know. It was a long time ago. And it was about Hellcat and Tigra fighting Tiger Shark, and A Tale of Two Kitties actually was the title. And I was in. And to this day, I still love West Coast Avengers. By the way, to me, Vision is still the guy with the completely white outfit. And Mockingbird is only good if she has the giant sleeves. That's not true, but I do like those characters. And I mean that is where most of my first comics came from. They weren't necessarily bought from a comic store or from a spin rack. They were bought in the dusty bins of flea markets and stuff all across upstate New York. And then of course non-sport trading cards. And so those things interested me. I didn't necessarily know which characters were big and quote unquote like obviously I knew who Superman was, but I didn't know beyond that who mattered or didn't matter, quote unquote, or who was Z-list or who was B-list, but I just knew who looked awesome and who looked interesting to me. And that's probably why even today, folks will look at me and say, oh, well, Steve quote likes the deep cuts, or Steve likes to pull the diamonds out of the rough or what have you. But it's just always been my point of view, because from the start, I didn't inherit a fandom from one of my parents or things like that. It was based on who just seemed fascinating to me, and it was something that's been with me since I was 2, back in the dark ages, and to be doing it now is pretty wild. But yeah, the origin story is perhaps a lack of interest in baseball, and an interest in bright colors and wild capes and costumes.
That's awesome. Do you still have that West Coast Avengers number 16?
I have a West Coast Avengers 16.
Okay.
My collection. I'm not one of those people whose mom sold their comics off. She thought they weren't going to be worth anything. I'm actually one of those people whose mom held on to all the books because with my father being a memorabilia guy, she thought they were all going to be worth something. That's also not true, by the way. Let me tell you, no matter how many copies of Youngblood you have, you can never even buy a fucking latte. But I did just pass on my collection to help put the down payment on my house. So that is all gone, but I do have a West Coast Avengers 16 still.
Nice. That's so. The West Coast Avengers is I don't collect a lot of comics I'd consider pre my era, which was when I started getting into comics in the 2000s, 2010s. But West Coast Avengers is the one I do collect. So I do have that West Coast Avengers number 16 somewhere in my bins back there. But I always dig. I go in my dollar bin store, or go to my store, go in the dollar bin, just to see what my comic shop owner has in there. And whenever I see any West Coast Avengers, I'm like, well, add that. Let's see if I have it. I don't care if I'm getting another one. It's fine.
Steve Englehart, man. He wrote I can't remember who drew it off the top of my head. I'm an asshole for that, but it was Steve Englehart that drew it.
So I want to get into your stuff, and I want to start with a big one right now, the Scarlet Witch. And ever since the show aired, there's been so many people clamoring ever since that show aired for a Scarlet Witch book, and it took a while to get there. We had the Trials of Magneto, we had the Darkhold that you wrote, and then it finally forged into the Scarlet Witch ongoing that began this year. I am curious on the pitch. Did you pitch the Scarlet Witch book to Marvel? Did they come to you with that idea?
Well, I mean, it wasn't certainly. It was certainly on their mind because we had done all this work in Darkhold and we had done this work in Trial of Magneto. Leah, of course, wrote that. Chance and fortune, I was in the X-Men office by the time that was getting put together as well. Um, but that being said, the question with all these events is always what next. I mean, they came to me and I came to them because these things, it's always about where you take a character. It's great to finally tie off a lot of long-term stories and pay them off, like we did with like Leah did with Trial of Magneto, like we tried to do with Darkhold. But then it becomes okay. We have this final splash of Wanda saying she's finally free of Chthon. She's she's no longer the Pretender. She's now the Redeemer over in Trial of Magneto. So what does she do now? There's not a lot of I don't as a creator you don't think that there's a lot of potential in ending a story unless you can start a new one, right? So from the moment we did those books, it was like, well, how can we do more with Wanda? How can we show people where she goes? It's great that she's unshackled from a lot of her past trauma. Now let's see what she does next. So we sort of came to each other. We've been dancing around each other, high school dance style. But we finally we finally got up the courage, and that's where this book came from.
Nice. So Sarah Pacelli was the primary artist on this title with you. What's it been like working with her? Because the way she draws Wanda is fantastic, and not just the superhero getup, but even just like the casual attire has just been so good.
Thank you. I mean, look, Sarah is one of the greatest artists working today. I am just some clown from Syracuse that makes people go boom. So like, the joking aside, like it's amazing working with Sarah. It's amazing working with Russell. We've been spoiled for riches on Scarlet Witch, and not just with them. Carlos Nieto did amazing work in the annual. It was not an easy issue to draw. Lorenzo Tomati is doing great work, helping Sarah with the second arc, or Sarah rather, pardon me. And you know, it's amazing. It's exciting because you send this book out, and the beauty of Sarah is that she focuses in on the work, and then you get an email with all 20 pages, and you're like, holy shit, But the not joke, the professional answer is that Sarah's an amazing artist. So my job as a writer, first of all, is to talk to her and find out what gets her excited, what she wants, what she's done before that she loves doing, what she hasn't done yet that she wants to do, and find a way to to craft a story that keeps her challenged, keeps her excited, to be in this world. 20 pages, 20 pages an issue. That's months of work, So, they are our first audience. Sarah is an incredible audience, an incredible artist. So, what's it like behind? It's like, how do you challenge one of the greatest artists working today? But the nice thing is that she has been energized. She's doing, in a career of wins, I think she's doing career work on Scarlet Witch. And I mean, it's a blast. It's an honor, and to keep throwing things in front of her and knowing that she's just going to elevate every moment and find new ways to tell those stories. We just got to keep her fed to use sports parlance, to use whatever. Like, that's my job as a creator.
So Russell Donovan, as you mentioned, he took over on the interiors. He had Nieto take over on the interiors for the annual as well. When you have different artists comes in as a writer, what are the challenges going into? Like, is it more of a communication challenge?
Well, a lot of it is it is lucky when you know who's going to draw your script when you write it. Now, of course, we knew Sarah was going to be the ongoing artist. She has had a new creator on project she's been working on, her child, which for necessary reasons took her out of the book, and we're not at all bothered by that. That's a momentous thing, and it's great. It's wonderful. So the real thing is about, honestly, working with Carla. Well, working with Carlos, working with Russell. What you really do is mental work. Like, yes, you have to prepare that you wrote that script for Sarah. The way Russell tells that story is not going to be the same, but that doesn't mean it's going to be worse. Quite the opposite. We all saw that issue. It's a banger, and it's a banger in a way that is totally different from how Sarah would have done it. So the work is in your head to sort of change. You put this out and you expected a Pichelli version of that. Now you're going to get a Dutterman version of that, and you've got to know that it's going to be different than you expected, but also still incredible, right? So a lot of it isn't here. There's not always the luxury of sort of like polishing a script to match an artist's interest. But the good thing is that in the case of Russell, I was already pretty aware of what he likes, because we talk about covers, we talk about what's coming and things like that. So it's all up here. It's to really gauge yourself to know that, well, first of all, every time you send a comic script out, Again, we are not in charge. We're the first person holding the baton, so you're already ready to be surprised. And that's part of the beauty of doing this job. So what it is we're just gauging, sort of like recentering yourself for the expectations of what your new collaborators do, and so that you are ready to be surprised rather than saying, oh, this isn't what Sarah would do, and so on and so forth. But it is otherwise, like, our job is to get out of the way. I mean, like Russell is a killer, Sarah is a killer. They don't need, like, they don't need me holding their hand. They need me taking the bridle off, taking the leash off, and saying run free. And that's really, to me, that's the job.
What have you enjoyed most about this new era of Wanda that you've helped create?
The things they let me get away with Darcy saying, maybe. I mean, knock on wood, an issue just went to print where she refers to someone as a gold-plated hole of an ass, and also a shiny, whining enema. And I'll believe that those, like, now technically that went to print, but I will believe that happened when I'm holding the book in my hands. But no, the joking aside, that has kind of been the joy to give Wanda like a wisecracking, cynical, but righteous Jimmy Olsen, you know? And I mean, like Sarah, pardon me, Darcy, it's a great character to work with as a writer, that type of character, because she says the things that often we might say where we're in those situations. Darcy's point of view is often my point of view on whatever absurd thing Wanda is doing, whatever crazy powerful thing, whatever strange thing Wanda is doing that for her is mundane. You know, there's almost nothing out of the ordinary when you're the Scarlet Witch, but when you're Darcy, a ton of stuff is wild and crazy and strange. The normal of a hero in the Marvel Universe has become anything but, right? So, like, it's nice. I think it's great to have that grounding factor, and I think it lends really great perspective. And yes, you can get away with calling Polaris She-Hulk, and everybody is really happy. I'm really happy. But the note behind the note is that she allows us to really, I think, again, ground Wanda without depowering Wanda or without like putting her in some sort of strange situation where she can't still be the Scarlet Witch. The life of the Scarlet Witch is wild, and it's bombastic, and it's cosmic. So the human perspective that Darcy gives, I think, is really fun. And of course, like, Wanda is not an inherently sarcastic person, so to be able to get that out there, I think that she's a real asset. And it is really, some of my favorite moments have been small moments between them. And of course, like, her one-liners. Because comic characters are absurd. That's why we love them. That's why my favorite character is Flex Mentallo. He's a dude in a leather Speedo that each muscle on his body has a different superpower. But we have to love that and lean into that absurdity. And that's what Darcy is here to remind us that, like superheroes are weird and strange, and that's okay, and it's fun.
So sticking, I was going to say mutant adjacent, because Wanda isn't considered a mutant anymore, but you do write with mutants. And you've completed the Marauders earlier this year, and tomorrow, pretty sure this episode's coming out tomorrow. Tomorrow, the Astonishing Iceman drops. Mm-hmm. Now, I have to ask, because I read the Hellfire Gala issue last week. Does this take place before or after the gala?
Oh, it's after. I mean, you'll see tomorrow, but it's certainly after. I mean, for people who are DMing me being like, is Iceman really dead? In response to the preview of the book, I want to be like, well, with all due respect, my friend, this is a preview of the book where he's very much alive that comes out after the Hellfire Gala. So I guess no spoilers, but yes, I mean, it would be a really quiet book if he was still dead.
So when you're writing for characters like Wanda and the mutants just in general, attacking characters with very diverse backgrounds, what's your approach when you take on their stories?
I mean, the approach, listen, any book, like the work is to spend time, especially reading the evergreen material with them, the core material, and finding out who they are. So in the end, now that answer is, of course, different every time. But you got to go back and really consider, like at their core. I mean, Kelly Sue DeConnick once referred to it as finding a character's core wound, which I thought was very poetic. But I'm not a poetic person. She is, and that's why she's one of the greats. But I do think behind that is you have to know them. You have to spend the time to know them, know why they do what they do. Everything in life is just a culmination, a collage, whatever metaphor you want of the choices we make, right? So that's true for us. Everything we do is for a reason. Um, Same has to be true for comic characters, and we have to know the reasons behind those. Once you know why they do what they do, you can then like use that as a little prism to challenge them and challenge those suppositions and force them into situations where doing what they do isn't easy, where the decisions and choices they would make are not easy to make, and so on and so forth. And that's different for everybody. In the case of Iceman, the Hellfire Gala is finally out, which is like for the past couple months I've been doing interviews, and they've been like, "What's it about?" And I'm like, "Well." Kind of hard because you haven't heard the Hellfire Gala. But we now know what Orcus is up to, and we know that they've said mutants, you got to get GTFO from Earth, and or else. And the thing about Iceman specifically is, I think this is a great time for him. Not in story. In story, it's a very hard time, but as a character, it's rare that there's been such a canvas for people to see what makes him unique. You know, Bobby's a class clown. And he's obviously he's evolved a lot from that, but at his core, that's who he was when he was introduced. And the thing about that is that seems kind of flippant, but a class clown breaks the rules to try to get a laugh out of people, and you get laughs out of people because you want to make them happy and you want to help them. So the thing about it is, like, when Orcus says mutants, you can't be on Earth, you can't be heroes anymore, you can't save people, you can't help people, you can't even exist. Iceman specifically is the guy that's going to be like, I'm going to do all those things 3 times as much and watch me, like, I dare you to come and stop me, because he doesn't care about the rules. Like, he cares mostly about making sure he can help the people he cares about. So, and those that need his help. And of course that's many, many heroes, but his core attribute, that person is like, when you tell him he can't do this, he really is going to want to do it much more than even before. That only fires him up. Well, a bad pun, but regardless, it only gets him more motivated to be who he is. And if Orcus says you can't save other mutants on Earth, you can't save mutant-adjacent people on Earth, you can't even appear and take physical form, well, guess what? He's going to be like, I'm doing it all the time, and try to stop me. And try to stop me is where the book comes from.
This new era, well, unfortunately, seems like it may be coming to an end after that last Hellfire Gala, but the Krakoa era of X-Men has been a resounding success, and there's been so many fans that have really come attached to this specific era of the mutants. Why do you think that is?
I think because it was fresh, it was challenging, and it was provocative. It wasn't, well, it's not that it wasn't an oppression narrative or a marginalized folks narrative, because, to be clear, it's not like the rest of Earth still decided that everybody loved mutants, But it was a pivot in perspective, like it's all about that moment where Magneto tells humans in the first part of House of X that, they have new gods now and you better watch out. Like, it was about, I think, taking the reins and upending the system, and it became a book about world building, about culture building and nation building, and of course superheroics and rescue and all those, and political action and all those things. But at its core, it pushed the mutant narrative forward, and it's always been a flexible but also imperfect metaphor for real marginalized people. So I think that with that in mind, it was nice, and I think people responded to the fact that we were finally giving them real progress. It wasn't just, we're trying to do the same thing over and over again with each new class of mutants at the Xavier School, who are trying to say, maybe if we're nice enough and we save enough humans, they'll stop trying to kill us. Now they're saying, well, fuck you if you try to kill us. We're going to go and it's not that we don't care. Here are 3 miracle medicines, but we would like to be left alone, please. And that please is more of a lip service, because if you don't, it's going to be really bad for you. So I think it was about, I think people responded really well, because if you identify with mutants for one reason or another, you finally got to see them taking control and taking the initiative and starting to build something for themselves. Not necessarily at the behest or within the power structures of humanity, but something that's truly mutant and something that truly comes from within their own culture.
I want to talk about a new title of yours real quick. Sainted Love from Vault Comics, which have an incredibly successful Kickstarter, getting over 800% of the goal. Tell me about that series.
Sainted Love. So Sainted Love is sort of a culmination of the themes that started in books like Virgil or books like Midnighter, even things like Iceman. We're talking about Orcus saying that you can't, it's not, you can't exist as a mutant anymore. Sainted Love is it's a time travel adventure epic. It's erotica, but it's about two men fighting this decade, like centuries long, history long system that has been working to erase any signs of queer culture, queer excellence, queer existence. And when the truth is, we've been here all along. So you have a Nikola Tesla type and a John L. Sullivan type, a pugilist, hopscotching across time and exploring our history, our hidden parts of our history as they defend it, and sometimes having sex with it as well. But it's for people who liked the rawness and the violence of Midnighter. It's got that, but it has the heart of more of like a Studio Ghibli movie. I mean, the art of Geopoda is right in that vein. So it's a truly unique book. It's both rhyming with a lot of the stuff I've done, but visually and tone wise, it's unlike anything I've ever done. And I'm super excited to get it out there. But we started developing this book almost a year ago. I never would I have predicted that it would be so prescient, as we have people quite literally trying to erase us from history, erase us from curriculums and things like that. What they're fighting against has more of a face than when we started putting the book together. But at the same time, this isn't necessarily a book that is just about punches in the face. I hope that it's also for like queer audiences as well. It's vindicating and empowering to see us standing up for ourselves. But I also hope there's parts of our history that maybe you discover that you didn't know before. It is an action erotica book with a foot definitely in the present, but there's a little bit of like early 1960s Doctor Who, where it was an adventure, but also you hopefully like you discover some stuff that you want to know more about along the way.
Nice. Where can people find that?
The Kickstarter's over, but the Kickstarter is only for the collected edition. So I believe we start coming out in September or October from Vault Comics. I believe issue 2 is up for pre-order now, so you can hit your local comic store and put that order in.
Always go to your local comic shop. What advice do you have for aspiring writers wanting to break into the comic industry?
Start writing. When I was 12 is when I met my mentor, who would go on to be the co-creator of Ben 10, and he was, I frequently say, lovingly brusque, especially for a 12-year-old. But he said, "Hey kid, if you want this to be your job, treat it like a job, or it'll never be one. So write every day, even if it's just for a half hour or an hour. And I'll either see you in a year with a new, with new content, new proposals or whatever, new samples, or I won't." I'm a very stubborn person, so I was like, "Well, fuck you, old man, and I'll be back in a year." Of course, he was like 29, but like, the point remains. It sounds simple, but and there's many more steps after that. But like to quote like Rocky and Creed, like that person in the mirror, that person staring back at you at the Zoom reflected in your computer, that is the first and greatest hurdle to breaking into any creative field. Folks might think, "Oh, I have to go to school to do this," or X, Y, and Z, but you don't. That's the wonderful thing. You just have to have a story to tell or things to say, a voice to put out there. So the first and simplest step, but also the hardest step, is start writing. And it's not going to be amazing at first. And I think it's unique to writers as well to think, "Oh, well, if it's not genius out of the gate, well, what the fuck am I doing?" But if you were an artist, people would tell you it's common comics phrase, it's a canned phrase, but like, you have to draw 1,000 bad pages before you draw a good one. So why, as a writer, would you not think the same? I think that don't be discouraged if it's, don't be discouraged if it's hard. Don't be discouraged if some days it's not great or it's not coming, but just keep pushing, because that's how you get there. And yes, after that, it becomes networking and it becomes finding a way to work with artists and get pages published and things like that. But in the era of crowdfunding and in the era of shows like San Diego and New York Comic Con and social media, where you can put your work out with different hashtags and things like that, that's gotten much easier than when I was younger, but the first hurdle is one that never changes, and that's yourself. So start writing, and also like start small. It's very common that folks will say, I have this amazing 48 page issue epic to tell, and for the record, like, I've never even gotten a book run to 48 page. I say that like I matter, like I'm still an asshole, but like it's rare that any book goes to 48 pages today. So the key is, and it's also easier. So this isn't even a, "Hey kid, books don't run to 50 issues anymore." If you want to have something that will show that you have talent and professionalism to an editor, it is more valuable to produce an amazing 8-page story, an amazing 10-page story, or a variety of them, because it is harder to tell a complete story with a beginning, middle, and end and emotional arc in 8 pages than it is in 20 pages, or than it is in 40 pages, or of course 48 issues. So start small because it's easier from an economic standpoint, a time standpoint, but it is also, there's much more utility in it. Because if you can do that, the thing that is hard for even us as creators, it's going to help you more when you are meeting editors and you are sending your samples in.
Steve, in an era where everyone's social media is across 15 different websites these days, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I'm the Steve Orlando on everything. I'm the Steve Orlando on Instagram. I'm the Steve Orlando on Twitter for as long as it lasts. I'm not using that other name. Stupid bastard. But and once the Hunger Games of social media are over, I am also the Steve Orlando on Threads and Blue Sky. We'll see which one survives. And I'm easy to find on there. You might find me on Facebook, but that's kind of where I keep my personal stuff happening. I need to have like that one little oasis, but I'm easy to find in all the others. So please reach out.
Steve, thank you so much. I've adored your Scarlet Witch run ever since it's been announced. I was super excited, pumping it up, making sure like my comic shop was like, "You're ordering every variant cover, aren't you, right?" And he has, and he's been so good with that, and I've adored it. I love the Emporium. I love what you've done with Darcy. It's been so good. Can't wait for more. I hope it keeps going. You can find me, everyone, on Twitter at Damon Tweet. You can find me on Threads at Damon Graham, because it's Instagram based. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can find me over here. You can find me over there. Whatever, as you said, the social media Hunger Games, whichever one wins, you can find me there. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time. This was a pleasure. Go support your local comic shop. Go read Steve Orlando's comics. Go pick up Scarlet Witch. Make sure it keeps going because it's so freaking good.